Hello and welcome to Growing Up B2B. I'm Delia, president of Delia Associates, the place where B2B brands go to grow. For over 60 years, and now across 2 generations, we've been helping B2B companies achieve next-level growth through brand distinction, quality lead generation, and sales enablement. Growing Up B2B was created for family business leaders who are passionate about growth, legacy, and making a lasting impact. Whether it's a multi-generational legacy or multiple family members working together, there's something truly magical about blending business with family. And we want to celebrate that right here on Growing Up B2B. So be sure to stick around to the end of the show and find out how you can be our next guest. Okay, let's get into it. Welcome to Growing Up B2B. I'm Delia, and I'm the second generation president of Delia Associates. We are the place where B2B brands go to grow. Hello and welcome to another episode of Growing Up B2B. I'm your host, Delia. I'm the second generation president of Delia Associates, the place where B2B brands go to grow. I'm so excited to introduce our guest today. He's James Zilenziger, Chief Operating Officer of Rodman Media, and he represents the third generation in his family to take a leadership role in the business. Rodman Media is recognized as the premier source of B2B industry news and information in manufacturing, personal care, healthcare, and other niche markets. With a controlled circulation over 140,000 in 120 countries, Rodman has a global reach and influences industry professionals around the world. James, thanks so much for joining us today.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Ed, for having me. I'm really excited to be on this podcast.
Awesome. So take me back to the beginning at Rodman Media. You started as a sales rep and worked your way up eventually to the role you're in now as Chief Operating Officer of the company. Tell me about that journey and what that taught you.
Sure. Yeah. Great questions. I graduated from college with my bachelor's degree actually in history in 2014. And with a history degree, as I've learned, you can do pretty much everything and nothing. And from there, I actually spent a year and a half working in education fundraising in Philadelphia. And during that process, I came to a crossroads where, my dad wasn't getting any younger. The business was continuing to grow in different ways. And so I had to make a decision whether I wanted to really pursue my own path in terms of education or possibly going to law school, or if I wanted to give a shot at the family business and see what that could be like. And ultimately, it was in November of 2014, I decided to come on with my dad at the family business. And I started as a very lowly sales rep. So that lasted about 18 months where I worked with a lot of cold call accounts. Most of them never got back to me. Some of them didn't exist anymore, but it was incredible practice for 18 months of learning about the brands that I was working on, trying to build up self-esteem and confidence with those brands and the products we offer. But at the same time, it was pretty crushing and demoralizing, just learning how to keep going when you keep getting knocked down and feeling I couldn't make a sale sometimes. There were weeks that would go without sales and not taking that personally. That was a big lesson I learned from there. And I spent 18 months in that role. I moved into a digital production role after that, where I worked more on the production side of our digital ads with some of our brands, which were Coatings World, Ink World, Print Electronics. And what I really did was after the sale was made, I worked with the sales reps, editorial team, anybody else that was on that brand team to manage putting up those digital advertising pieces. And so it was nice to see, I started seeing the process from sale to production and finish line. And finally, from there, after I spent about 2 years within the digital production role, I joined up with, at the time, Judy Carr, who was the COO. She now serves as our CFO. She played both roles at the time, the CFO and the COO. And I worked under her as an operations manager for a couple of years, where I dove a bit more into how the operations went at a higher view, a higher level. So I understood some of the nitty-gritty of production. While I was a high school student, I had also interned on the editorial side a bit. And so I got my hands wet during one summer just writing articles for the brand Happy that we have, which is in the personal products and household industry. And over time, I'd say it would probably be over a course of 6 to 7 years, I had really done a tour of the departments per se and started learning the ins and outs, not necessarily a pure expert in every department, but enough to be dangerous, as I'd like to say, where I could speak the language, understand the processes, and understand how it all fit together at the end of the day.
So that's really interesting because you really touched on all aspects of the business along your journey. Was it hard transitioning from, so okay, you were in a sales role, then you shift to a digital manager role, then to an operations. Talk about those transitions. Were those challenging or difficult, or were they more fluid for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the most difficult one by far was when I was in the sales role. And some of that had to do with the quality of the leads I was getting because it was really a role that I could enter into, not mess up because I wasn't working with major clients. But for someone like me who I tend to be more of a type A person, I want I want it laid out, clear, closed at the end of the day. And what I learned quickly with sales is there's a huge creative side to sales.
Mhm.
And some years are great, some years are not. A lot of it's out of your control. And a lot of it is based on how well you can really communicate to the client, build those relationships. And while I definitely enjoyed that, it was not my natural go-to, I would say. So
Mhm.
when I transitioned into the production role, it was fantastic to have the background of the sales, the effort that went into that, and it gave me a lot of respect for our sales team moving
Mm.
forward. I think that is one of the things that can sometimes happen, whether it's in a family business or a business in general. The individual working in their silo can start to see other departments or silos as not as important as theirs, or they don't understand what I'm going through. And I'd say even though the sales part was difficult, it really gave me an understanding of how much our sales team has to deal with every day in terms of different personalities, different needs and wants of clients. And so the transition actually to digital production for me was almost a little bit of a breath of fresh air because
Mm.
it played more to my strengths of once I get that ad in, I can set it up, I can optimize it, I can report on it, those types of things I really enjoyed. And so then it was more natural for me to move into the operations side of the business and almost see a higher level view of each department going on while still maintaining that understanding of some of the hard work that goes in on the individual basis in each of those departments.
Certainly. So it would be safe to say that by virtue of having all that exposure, you've got a very rounded view of the business and one where you can lead, one would say, with a lot of empathy because it's not like you know what's the person is doing on the other side of the table. You did it. It's like, I get it.
That's always my goal. And I'd say, I think that can be a major, if that is not accomplished, especially within a family business, that can really hold back and damage a family business in the long run. Because let's face it, when you're family coming into a family business, there are some incredible benefits to that. But there's also a lot of struggles with that because you have the name association. Sometimes family members can come in and expect to immediately be in a position of power rather than working from a position of earning that over time. And what my father did, Rod, who currently serves as a CEO, that I thought was very smart. I may not have liked it that much at the time, but he really made me work in positions where I was answering to others that had been at the company longer than me, that had more expertise than I did, and slowly building rapport and just reputation, being willing to do the grunt work. That's what it really came down to. And what I try to emphasize when I speak to other family businesses or even other family members that are interested is that just because you have the last name of the family business does not mean you should be exempt from any grunt work or really working alongside others who are putting in every day a lot of work, solving a lot of challenges and problems. And so that was, it allowed me to not just understand what was going on in each department, but to also just build rapport with my fellow coworkers.
Understood. And you had a little bit of exposure before you started this journey. You said you'd intern, but did you, was it going back as a younger version of James, did you have an orientation of, I understand the family business, I see what they do? Was there some exposure even as a much younger version of you?
There was a little bit. I
Yeah.
do remember some summers if I had a break between camp or something like that, coming in and stuffing those envelopes. They're very basic tasks. And what I think is really neat about Rodman, and I think this can be common with some family businesses. So I believe our average tenure at the company is somewhere between 14 to 15 years. So we
Wow.
have people on the very high end of curve where they've been at the company over 30 years. And so
Wow.
some of them have known me when I've been in diapers, which is incredible to me. And
Hmm.
we have also a lot of people who've been here 10 to 15 years, but they started here after college and they've stayed. And so I think it's an interesting perspective of how, even though I came in and maybe stuffed envelopes and stuff like that, a lot of these people have been in my life in some way for a very long time. And that's been pretty incredible.
That is knowing your industry. That
Yeah.
is not incredible. That is amazing because
Yeah.
you don't see that kind of tenure. If anything, you see the opposite, people turning over with high frequency. What do you think it is about Rodman Media that, whether it be the culture, the environment, the organization, that people come and say, yeah, this is home and I'm going to build a career here and I'm going to do well here? What do you think it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that I'm always trying to not measure too intensely, per se, because I know everybody has their own individual story. But I would say that my father, Rod, really, when he joined the business back in the 1980s, I think it was around 15, 20 people that were together. We're now hover somewhere between 65 to 70 employees. And so he really grew a lot of our brands. And one thing that he did really well as the brands grew is he still always made himself very approachable. As the company grew, the one of the hardest things I think is once you start transitioning from that 15 to 20 person company that truly does feel like a close family, and then you get into that 65 to 70 person range where it feels a bit more mid-size, you need more corporate structure, you need more standards in place. One thing we've been able to maintain is still creating a very open dialogue, I believe, with our employees. And so we're constantly assessing what are the markets compensating in terms of our different roles. And we really do try to hit above market compensation. But besides that, we have general corporate policies, but we also really try to treat people on an individual basis. For example, we have a hybrid policy for work. We require 2 days in office, 3 days remote. But if there is an individual who went out on maternity leave, is interested in spending the first year at home with her new baby, that is something that we're not just going to simply slap a blanket policy on, but we do allow for an individual to come up to us and speak to us about that situation and how we can work with them. And so it's one of those things that we are trying to maintain as much as we have grown, still that family feel, and really emphasize that we want to work with the individual employee, even though we have to have some corporate structure in place. We want to respect and acknowledge that everybody has different individual needs at the same time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So somebody good, they come, you make it very easy for them to stay and give them good reason to stay for a very
Yeah.
long time.
Yes.
Your role now as Chief Operating Officer of the company, was there a particular moment where, if you look back, James, you said, okay, I'm ready to take on the next level? Did you feel you were ready? Was there a moment where you said, I'm ready now, I'm ready to do this next challenge?
I love that question. I think when I was offered the position, as Judy's role continued to expand in the financial side, and she's a whiz at that stuff, and she's just fantastic at it. And as I grew under her and watched her leadership, it became more of a natural, hey, if you can focus more on the finances and handle that, how can I continue to take this off of your plate? And so that's where the discussion naturally happened, and I naturally then moved into it. I don't know if there was ever an exact moment where I was like, oh, I'm ready to be the COO now. But I think it came more as the discussions happened. I didn't feel petrified or just really scared about that possibility. I actually felt it was natural, and it was encouraging, and I felt supported. That's the huge thing.
Mhm.
Knowing that these employees that I have worked with for a long time trusted me in different ways, were willing to give me a shot, and were willing to support me when I made mistakes. I think that was clear. There's no doubt for anyone in business, you're going to fail every now and then. Are you going to have people around you that say, hey, look, I failed too. I've made mistakes. Let's get back up. Let's keep going. I think that's something key about Rodman that has really encouraged me in my growth.
Awesome, awesome. So now in this bigger leadership role, what's one of the maybe more surprising lessons you've learned now being on that side of the leadership team? A surprising lesson that you've or a takeaway?
Oh, I love this question too. So the past couple of years, let me back up a little bit. When I first came into the role, I'd say one thing I really struggled with was learning how to lead individuals that had been at the company much longer than I had, that were much older than I was, because there's always a bit of a hesitancy of, okay, I have to not necessarily break bad news, give direction in a certain area. And this person has been at the company much longer than I have. I'm not sure how they're going to take it. And there was a bit of fear. And so one thing I looked into was actually bringing on an executive coach for myself that I've worked with for 2 years that has been tremendous. Not all executive coaches are, it's almost like a therapist. There are some great therapists, there are some not so great therapists. And thankfully, I was paired with one and she's been tremendous. And I think over the last couple of years, some of the biggest things I've learned, which might seem obvious, but how paramount trust is in an organization, especially in leadership and amongst a leadership team. If you do not trust your leaders and others, it slows everything down. It puts red tape everywhere. It encourages second guessing, and it can put you out of business at the end of the day. You can have incredible products, you can have a lot of tenacity, great technical skill, but if you and your team are always second guessing each other or not trusting the motive behind what someone is doing, you can't keep up in this economy, in this market. And so that was one thing I learned quickly, was anyone that I felt like they didn't trust me or I didn't trust them, it was so important to start building that relationship and understanding what was behind that lack of trust. What did I need to talk about with that person to
Mhm.
repair that lack of trust? And what we've seen is, as we've been able to be more transparent, repair that lack of trust, have those tough and awkward conversations, we've been able to, with a much greater speed, approve things, get things done, be on the same page. It doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. We still make mistakes, but we're not throwing those mistakes in each other's face and using that
Mhm.
as a reason not to collaborate or work together further on down the road.
That's a huge point. Really, two, trust was one, but also looking to the outside for resources and knowledge. I certainly know this as a second gen, you as a third. There was no playbook for how to do that. There was no manual. I bet your dad, as second gen, didn't have a manual for how to do that. So we had to learn, and sometimes that learning may not exist on the inside of the organization. So we go to the outside and learn what we need to learn. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, it was very important for me to have somebody that was a coach who was completely removed from Rodman. She actually has worked in her own family businesses, and so has a lot of experience in that area to say, hey, I don't really have much skin in the game besides whatever fee you're paying me type of thing. I'm seeing this going on. I'm seeing you have these patterns that may be holding you back. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And it's just amazing to me how many things I look back in the beginning. I'm like, wow, I would have done that so differently if I had this coach sooner, asking those questions, really prying into things.
Nice, nice. So, talking a little bit about the inner workings of the business, I know that in addition to yourself, your brother-in-law Tom
Yes.
also plays a role in the business. So, talk about that for a minute. How you make family business or family relationships work in a professional setting.
Yeah, yeah. This has been one that we've had to learn and feel out over time. And so my brother-in-law, Tom Morford, he serves as our digital content director. And he came on, I want to say in 2016, 2017, so a couple of years after myself. And
Hmm.
Tom has a background in journalism and writing. And what he did is he also worked in a couple different departments, whether it be social media or with some of our directories and stuff. And so he learned as well different aspects of the company and how they functioned. And one of I think the biggest tension points that a lot of family businesses have is, how in the world do you keep business and personal separate? And at the end of the day, I had to stop sweating over that, because I think it's a really nice idea to have this clear, distinct line. I don't think it's practiced well all the time, and I think you have to allow some breathing room in there. And for example, at family gatherings, at holidays, stuff like that, I will be more conscious of what I discuss. We don't need to discuss business all the time. We don't
Hmm.
need to bring up the things that are going on in the office. But at the same time, if something does come up, I'm not immediately shutting it down and saying, okay, guys, no, this is the personal gathering. We'll talk about it and we'll move on. So thankfully, Tom is not someone to bring that up a lot.
Okay.
Personal gatherings. So that's been huge. And it's been really great for me. And it's just nice to have somebody that experiences similar tensions and struggles, maybe being a family member, but also knows that there's a lot of benefits and great things and great influence that we can have on the company as family members.
But it's a great point and a subject that comes up a lot because you're in the family, you're in the business. Those lines blur very easily. And it's not, doesn't take much to spark a big discussion at a family gathering about something that happened at the office or some dynamic that's going on. And then the next thing you spent half of the holiday gathering talking business.
Yes. Yeah. It can definitely happen. And trust me, my wife would make sure to say, oh, there have been those times where
Yeah.
we've been at Thanksgiving dinner and James and Rod are talking plenty about something. And it's something that I've had to become much more conscious of. And
Mhm.
like I said, not to completely shut it down, but to be mindful of how much our conversation, especially within those areas. And when there are other family members that aren't directly involved in the business,
Mhm.
but are aware of different situations going on, that we let that consume the time together.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I've also seen both firsthand and from others. There's people working in the family business of the family, and then there's people that are on the fringe, on the outsides. And sometimes that influence chimes in when you start to blur the lines, and sometimes it's not always the best input.
Exactly. Yeah. And I always remind myself, everything I am saying is from my perspective at the end.
Mhm.
Is not there's truth probably somewhere within there, as well as everybody else when they give their opinions. They're pulling it from something that they believe is truth. But I've tried to get better at saying, hey, what I'm sharing is from my perspective. I could be wrong. Always leaving that door open
Mhm.
for being wrong.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, some years ago, you were at a crossroads, and it was clear, James, you could have gone in a few different directions. You elected to go in the direction of Rodman Media, now representing Gen 3. What advice would you give to somebody going back in time who's at that crossroads you were at, who's saying, do I do this or not? Do I join the family business? Do I go my own way? What do I do? What would be something you might say to them to give them a little bit of guidance and direction?
Yeah. So one thing I will say is I never felt pressured. My father never pressured me. He was very honest with me about, hey, if you're not interested in this, don't do this. Like, this could be 40 years of your life. And it's not worth spending 40 years of your life if it's not going to be something that is of great interest to you. And so I never felt pressure from my parents, my family. It was always an option. It was always
Mhm.
presented as an option, but it was also presented as this is your choice.
Mhm.
And so I think that continues to carry today for something I would recommend for
Mhm.
individuals that know they have an opportunity to possibly join a family business, is that if your motivation behind that is this feeling of pressure and, living up to the expectation of somebody else, you might want to step back and one, maybe talk to others a little bit about that, get their input on it, but not rush into the family business. Because like I said, family businesses can get tough. They can get messy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are taken personally. It's hard to separate certain things, but there are also wonderful things about it. And I would say slow down. And I would say, if you do, though, feel, hey, this is something I could really enjoy doing. This could be a great opportunity. Know that, there's a lot of huge benefits to working in a family business. I just think back to really just history before the industrialization era. Like, you had agricultural societies, like kids working alongside their mothers and fathers every day, learning the family trade, learning the skills. This is very much what humanity and civilization did for thousands of years. And that really didn't change until the last 100 or so years. And so there is a really neat thing about it, being able to work with your father, your mother, cousins, siblings every day, because there is a unique bond in using your hands, your mind, your skill sets as a family. So that's what I would probably say.
Awesome. Awesome. So, turning the focus to the company, you just celebrated a fairly major milestone, as did Delia Associates. We both turned 60 in 2024. So,
Congratulations.
thank you. And to you. In you, and I guess us both, and in industries that have seen rapid and dynamic change. And thinking back to when I was first starting out and first met some of the folks representing Rodman back in the day to today. The growth of the company, the expansion of the company has been remarkable. What would you say has been some of the keys or the key to staying relevant in the media industry today? What is it that Rodman's doing that's keeping you relevant, keeping you moving forward, and keeping you growing?
Yeah, so there's, I would say, a technical and a cultural aspect to this answer. Technically, we have really invested a lot in our websites, our products. Over the last year and a half, we moved from a very custom CMS system to developing a completely brand new, nicely designed, more functionality websites based on WordPress. We have a really excellent team, and we've spent a good amount of dollar investing in that to make sure we're automating where we can automate, we're being more efficient where we can be more efficient, and really just allowing our employees to open up their time to do other things than the grunt type of work that would take longer than usual. That's, I would say, is on the technical side been pretty major. On the cultural side, one thing that is really helping our company continue to grow, be relevant, is we are investing in coaching for the entire executive team, other employees that are looking to move up into roles as others retire or transition to other jobs. And so that has been a really incredible opportunity for us to address pain points, things that might go untalked about, elephants in the room, those types of issues that we have might have been ignoring and not even realizing it for a few years. And so I would say that has been almost more transformational in some ways than the technical stuff, because when you have employees that enjoy going to work, that feel heard, that know their opinions are maybe not everything is being met. Maybe some things are being, there's a middle ground where, but they're at least their voice doesn't just get squashed.
Mm-hmm.
Can better service the customer and externally and work better with vendors and so many other things when you don't have that stress of just feeling like I'm just a machine doing something every day.
Mm.
And so I'd say those two aspects are how we're trying to invest in the company, whether it be technically or culturally, so that we can just continue to be a really, hopefully, great family business for generations to come.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's not easy because I think we went through that similar transformation here where I had a real good system when I was younger. If I had a problem, I just pushed it under the rug. And after a while, you'd come into my office and say, "What's that big mountain?" "Oh, that's all my problems under the rug." So now
Yeah.
we take them out of the rug and we address them one at a time as they're occurring. So no longer do we have a big mound of problems sitting in the corner. So everything is addressed up front. And I think it's just a better way to work. And you feel better, the people around you feel better because nothing is tucked away or nothing is put under the rug. Everything's in the open and discussed. So a good way to live. So the media landscape, it constantly evolves. So what are some things that Rodman is doing to stay ahead of the curve or within the curve to remain competitive in this changing landscape?
Yeah, everybody's go-to answer right now is probably looking at AI. We're definitely looking at that, not necessarily jumping hard one way or the other way, but leaving a lot of experimentation and creativity on the table with our employees. And so we actually have put together like a specific use case plan, guidelines, everything. What we've done instead is we've picked a couple of individuals who are very interested in whether it be exploring ChatGPT more or AI that's built into their current platforms and giving them license to, within reason, as long as they're not putting like very sensitive data information in there, but play with it, experiment with it, and then tell us how this can be used to make your job better or others' jobs better. And
Mm-hmm.
so one way we've been sharing that with the company is I run a Rodman recap quarterly where I really sit down with an employee or a group of employees and I interview them asking, hey, what have you done recently, whether it be with AI or new tools you're using? How can this help others? How can this bring Rodman into a continued competitive atmosphere where we lead and come out on top? And so it's through that we've been able to share those ideas with other employees at our company, have more fruitful discussions. And from that, we've really developed certain just sheets, guides, other things, better prompts that we can use to make our workflow move faster and more efficiently without sacrificing the quality of it. And so AI is definitely one thing that we've been looking at pretty seriously. And then I'd say the other thing is just continue to train our employees in different skills. What we've, I think, learned pretty quickly on is that it makes more sense to train or retrain current employees than necessarily hiring new staff, because there is a strong culture. If the employee is a strong cultural fit and has the potential to continue to learn the technical skills, that's a win for me.
Hmm.
Rather than always looking for a new person to come in and try to integrate them and see if it fits and all that kind of stuff. And so we've been investing more in our production department, having them move from just, we have a print and a digital presence, to understanding all of it. And then that has allowed different roles within the digital department to expand as well, whether it be more on the programming analytics side rather than just the production side. And so those are some of the investments we've been making.
Awesome. Awesome. Getting back to you, in our previous conversation, you mentioned that you're currently pursuing a master's in organizational leadership at Fordham. Talk about that for a minute. What inspired you to go for that advanced degree at this juncture, and if you can share a little bit about what you're getting out of that.
Sure. Yeah. So after working with my exec coach for a couple of years, I started exploring different programs in organizational leadership. And I ultimately decided to pursue this master's because I loved the executive coaching aspect that I was having on an every other week basis. And I wanted to understand in a class setting with other professionals what issues they were running into, how they work through those issues. So what I've really gained from this program more than anything is just an expanded view of how complicated leadership is in many ways. I think it's so easy to be like, okay, this person is the CEO, the COO, like they should have the power to do what they need to do. But in many ways, like that is earned and that is demonstrated and shown, and it doesn't at the end of the day attach to a name. And I really wanted to make sure that as a third generation business, I think it's something around like 12 to 14% of businesses survive third generation. I wanted to be in that 12 to 14%. And I felt like in some ways it was an obligation. And for me, if I was going to take this seriously, to do everything I could in a different, in a certain manner that I was capable of, to prepare myself that 12 to 14% is not a high number. And
Yeah.
and so I have employees that have been with us for a long time. I know that we are helping them provide for their families in different ways, and I wanted to take that seriously. And so I felt like pursuing a master's in organizational leadership could continue to increase that likelihood that we survive the 12 to 14%.
Same. And by the way, it's the same percentage ratios for first to second from what I was
Wow.
told.
Okay.
So you're in a rare camp there at the third. But I think that something that from our earlier conversation as well as this one, that's fairly readily seen in you is a thirst for learning, wherever it might come, whether it be internal, external, and certainly something of a driver that keeps you motivated and keeps you rolling forward, and is ultimately going to keep Rodman rolling forward because you're always going to be relevant.
And I would say that's a great point. If that is probably one of the biggest, if not most important aspect I look for in any hire. Are they hungry, excited to learn? Because with the pace that things move today, you might have the technical skill set as of this moment, but give it a month, give it a year, it's already expanded, grown, changed in certain ways. And so you have to be willing to learn and be open to that change in that way if you're really going to survive or help a company thrive. And so that's definitely something that I personally love it, enjoy it. I know it's a little bit of a struggle for others to that it can be exhausting, that constant learning and that pace, but
Sure.
it's paramount in today's economy.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about the dynamic between you and Tom in the business. One
Sure.
one other relationship we haven't touched on, which I'd like to, your dad.
Yes.
Talk about that. What's it like working in the environment with dad?
Yes. So it's been how many years? I've been here 10 years. And so I would say in the beginning, it wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. It was what you would expect of a 20-something-year-old son trying to learn to figure out the working world, losing his temper sometimes. His dad, you're when you're in school, you're used to getting a grade. You're used to
Yeah.
getting that immediate feedback on how you did. And then you go into the working world and it's like they want you to accomplish the job, but they're not like, hey, you were amazing. You killed it. Here's 100 on your paper. And so for me, as somebody that really just was fueled by those types of things, it created animosity in the beginning. And it wasn't by any means going to destroy our relationship. But for me, it was a big growth aspect, learning that I could do a good job without having to hear that or expect that all the time.
Hmm.
So that was
Yeah.
today, I would say I would describe our relationship as a partnership, really. I take what he says seriously. He takes what I say seriously. Sometimes we don't agree on everything. There's been plenty of times where we don't agree, but we give it breathing room. We don't just let emotions go out of whack. And then if we don't agree, we try to see if there's a middle ground, or one of us might have to say, hey, you know what? I trust you. Like, you've had more experience in this area than I do. Even though I don't agree, we're not going to get anywhere with a standstill. So let's try out your idea. And again, if it doesn't work out, then we don't use that as ammo to try to the next time. I think that's one of the biggest things that can destroy a company, is using history as ammo to try to take somebody else down.
Yeah. And it's not easy because I think back when my father and I overlapped, we're a couple of crazy passionate Italians. So yeah, we're going to lock horns. It's going to happen. And, then it was really a question of, sometimes I just say, he feels really passionate about this. Go ahead, take it.
Exactly.
Take this one. And that's fine. And I think sometimes you have to have those concessions where you say, I'm going to yield on this one.
Yes.
And for the good of the business, right? And the good of the family, really, too. You stepped into a pretty big leadership role, and there might be other leadership roles down the road. If one of our listeners was in that position where they were in the family business, they were plugging along, they were doing a good job, but an opportunity came for them to step up and play a bigger role, whether it be a COO or some other leadership position in the company. What's something you would share with them in terms of advice before they made that step? What's something they should be thinking about?
So something I wish I had done was probably talk to more employees before taking this role about what current issues, problems they've been facing. So I wish I would have taken more of a posture of listening in the beginning. Just because you have the title doesn't mean you automatically know what to do. You know how to solve all the problems that have been going on for 50 years, whatever it is. Really, the problem solving comes from a lot of the coworkers. Even though I might lead the initiative, most of the solutions are a combination of ideas that coworkers have come up with that have more knowledge about it or more expertise in a certain area than I do. And just not assuming because I have the title that I suddenly have this immense amount of knowledge that has just been implanted in my brain within the next day. And I would, highly suggest to anybody that's moving into an upper management C-suite type of role within a family business, not to let it get to your head, and really to maintain a posture of listening. And if you get the chance before moving into that position, go around and talk to individuals about what they're not satisfied with. And be careful not to take that personally. Like, they let them freely share without feeling like there's going to be any type of punishment or retaliation because they might disagree with something that's going on.
I wish you were around like 29 years ago for me to hear what you just said, because that was huge. To
Yeah,
listen and talk to the personnel before taking that step and to really understand what the key issues are. So when you do,
right.
you're going to bring about positive and wanted lasting change. That's awesome. So final question, James. If
Yeah.
somebody, one of our listeners, wanted to get in touch with you or to learn more about what's going on at Rodman Media, or maybe one of its titles, what's the best way to connect?
Yes, you're more than welcome to reach out to me via email, which is jzilenziger@rodmanmedia.com. Sorry about the last name. It is a crazy one. You can also find me on LinkedIn at James, and I'm usually available on either. I check emails pretty much constantly, like everybody else, and I'm on LinkedIn a good bit too, just seeing what's going on. So I'm happy to respond to any emails, messages. Feel free to connect with me. Would love to connect.
Awesome. And all that information will be in the notes on the podcast as well. So that is a long last name, but we'll spell it correctly there too.
Great, thank you.
Hey, James, thank you so much for being with us today. This was awesome. Once again, we've been speaking with James Zilenziger, Chief Operating Officer at Rodman Media, and I'm your host, Delia. Thanks so much for joining Growing Up B2B, and have a wonderful day.
Great. Thank you, Ed. I appreciate it.
Same. Hey, thanks so much for tuning into Growing Up B2B. To explore more episodes and insights, visit podcast.delianet.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice. Having worked with hundreds of family-led businesses across my career, and being a second-generation leader myself, I'm on a mission to help every family business I meet achieve next-level growth for their organization. So feel free also to connect with me on LinkedIn and let's support each other. You can also find out more about my company at delianet.com. Again, I'm your host, Ed Delia, and thanks so much for joining us today. Take care.